What is happening right now in the Middle East is going to affect your life, not someone else's life, yours. The price of fuel you pay, the cost of goods you buy, the stability of the economy you live in. All of it is connected to what is unfolding right now, and almost nobody is explaining it to you in a way that actually makes sense. That changes today. Floyd, Senior's Authority. And this is the analysis that mainstream media does not have the courage to give you. Stay until the end, because the final piece of this picture does not just complete the story. It reframes everything that came before it. Here is something most people never teach you about major conflicts. They do not explode. They build. Quietly, gradually, through a sequence of developments that individually seem manageable, until suddenly they are not. And the people who saw it coming were not psychics. They were simply paying attention to the right signals at the right time. Those signals are firing right now, all of them, at the same time. Over the past several weeks, key military support systems across the region have been coming under sustained, deliberate pressure: early warning radar installations, forward operational infrastructure. The background systems that never make headlines but that every serious military operation depends on completely. When these systems are healthy, aircraft fly safely. Command centers see clearly. Decisions get made with adequate margin and adequate information. When these systems degrade, quietly, without fanfare, beneath the surface of the daily news cycle, margins shrink. Distances close, and risks that were once theoretical become suddenly, violently real. This week, they became real. And what happened next is the first signal you need to understand, because it tells you exactly how far the degradation has gone. A United States KC-135 aerial refueling tanker went down over western Iraq. 6 American crew members were on board. U.S. Central Command confirmed that 2 KC-135 aircraft were involved in separate incidents. One landed damaged. The second did not come back. Before you move past this story the way most people did, stop. The KC-135 is not a frontline aircraft. It does not carry weapons. What it does is something more strategically important. It makes the entire air operation possible at scale. Fighter jets burn fuel fast. Without aerial refueling, their range collapses, their time in the air shrinks, and any sustained air campaign becomes a fraction of what it needs to be. The KC-135 removes every one of those limitations. But here is its fatal vulnerability. It is large. It is slow. It cannot evade danger the way a fighter can. It was built to operate in clean, secure, protected airspace, well behind the front line, shielded by a functioning defense architecture. When that architecture holds, the KC-135 is safe. When that architecture develops holes, when radar degrades, when early warning thins, when the protective layer weakens, the KC-135 finds itself in airspace it was never designed to survive. That is what happened over western Iraq this week. 6 lives lost, and a signal fired that tells you the operational environment has crossed a critical threshold. Support aircraft flying behind the front line are no longer protected. But that signal is only the beginning. Because what happened next made it significantly worse. A drone struck a French military installation in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq. 6 French soldiers were wounded. France confirmed the casualties. Now here is the context that transforms this from a regional incident into a strategic warning. France had just deployed a naval carrier group to the region. That is not a casual gesture. Countries do not send carrier groups to conflict zones without intent. It is a declaration of presence, of capability, of willingness to be involved in whatever this becomes. Someone responded to that declaration by targeting French soldiers directly, and that response sent a message that traveled far beyond 6 wounded soldiers. It traveled to Paris, to Brussels, to every NATO capital watching this situation and calculating its own exposure. The message was simple and unmistakable. Your presence here makes you a target. France is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It is one of NATO's most capable military powers. When French soldiers take casualties in a zone where France has made a major strategic commitment, the political pressure to respond does not quietly disappear. It builds. It demands action that is visible and credible. And when major Western powers start responding to direct casualties, when they move from supporters to parties with active grievances, the conflict's circle expands in ways that make every pathway to resolution significantly more complicated. This is no longer contained to the primary parties. It is reaching outward. And outward is a direction that conflicts, once started, rarely reverse on their own. Hold that thought. Because what Tehran said this week makes that direction even harder to reverse. Iranian sources confirmed another wave of missile launches toward targets in Israel. But the launches themselves are not the story Floyd needs you to focus on. The story is what Iranian leadership said alongside them. They did not hedge. They did not leave room for interpretation. They made their position explicit, public, deliberate, and on the record. They intend to continue. Understand what that means. There is a fundamental difference between a conflict that persists because the parties cannot stop it and a conflict that persists because at least one party has made a conscious decision to keep it going. The first can sometimes be interrupted from outside. Diplomacy creates openings. Exhaustion creates willingness. The second is different. Because the continuation is not a problem, it is a policy. And policies do not change because of external pressure alone. They change when the cost becomes unsustainable, or when the objective has been achieved. Tehran is telling you their cost-benefit calculation still favors continuation, which means the missile exchanges we have seen so far are not the ceiling of this confrontation. They may be the floor. And now, the development that received the least coverage this week, the one that should have received the most, the one that does not just affect the Middle East, it affects you directly wherever you are in the world. Reports have emerged that naval mines may have been placed in portions of the Strait of Hormuz. If you do not know this waterway, understand it immediately. It is a narrow passage, in places barely 40 kilometers wide, through which approximately 20% of the world's entire daily oil supply passes. Every single day, without interruption, feeding the energy demands of Europe, Asia, and every economy on Earth that runs on fuel. There is no single point on the map whose disruption would be felt more quickly, more broadly, and more personally by more people than the Strait of Hormuz. And if mines are confirmed in that strait, this conflict has just crossed a threshold that changes everything. This is no longer just a military confrontation between regional powers. It becomes an act of economic disruption aimed at the entire global economy. Shipping companies cannot operate in mined waters. They reroute, they delay, they stop. Insurance costs explode overnight. Carriers refuse to operate until the situation resolves. And when the oil stops flowing, even partially, even temporarily, it does not stay in the Middle East. It arrives at your fuel pump. It arrives in your heating bill. It arrives in the price of every product that needs energy to be made or moved. It arrives in the inflation numbers that governments around the world are already struggling to control. This is why Washington, Beijing, and Berlin are watching the strait with an intensity that goes beyond military concern. The economic stakes are not secondary. For most of the world's governments and financial institutions, they are primary. If confirmed, this single development has the power to pull every major global economy into this confrontation, not by choice, but by consequence. And the final piece. U.S. naval carrier groups in the region have repositioned their operational locations. Official explanation has been limited. That limited explanation is itself the message. These assets do not move casually. They move when the people with the best intelligence, the clearest picture, and the greatest responsibility have concluded that something is coming, and that their current position needs to change in anticipation of it. They are not reacting. They are already ahead of what they see developing. And what they see, from intelligence that no outside analyst can fully access, is apparently significant enough to move the most powerful naval assets in human history. Now bring every piece together. A degraded operational environment where support aircraft are being lost behind the front line. Allied Western forces taking targeted casualties. A regional power publicly committed to continuation. Potential mines in the world's most critical energy corridor. And the most powerful navy on Earth quietly repositioning in anticipation of what comes next. Each piece is serious. Together, they describe something the word conflict no longer contains. This is a multi-dimensional confrontation, military in its immediate form, economic in its reach, diplomatic in its consequences, that is still expanding, still finding the limits of what it will become, and nowhere near resolution. This is not the situation it was 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks from now, it will not be the situation it is today. Floyd will give you honesty. The near-term picture is not encouraging. No ceasefire framework exists. No public negotiations are confirmed. Every major party has signaled continuation. The circle is expanding. And the economic dimension, if the Strait situation develops, accelerates everything. Watch Tehran in the next 72 hours. Their language has predicted their actions throughout this conflict. Any shift in tone, however subtle, matters. Watch the Strait of Hormuz. Confirmation of mines triggers international responses that pull additional powers in rapidly and potentially irreversibly. Watch Paris. A government that deploys a carrier group and then takes casualties does not stay quiet. How France responds tells you how unified the Western position actually is. Watch Washington. Everything is converging toward a moment where the United States must state its red lines clearly and publicly. When that statement comes, read everything else in its light. This is the complete picture. Not fragmented, not sanitized, not compressed into 3 minutes for an audience that deserves better. This is what Senior's Authority exists to give you. And this is what Floyd delivers every single time. Most channels tell you what happened. Senior's Authority tells you what it means, what comes next, and why it matters to your life before it becomes tomorrow's crisis. If this analysis gave you that, subscribe to Senior's Authority right now. Turn on every notification. Because this situation is moving fast and the next major development is coming sooner than most people expect. When it arrives, you will not be catching up. You will already be there. This is Floyd, Senior's Authority,